Rohan, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you and so excited to hear from you about the story of Neuromersive. So I'll hand over to you.
Well, I'm really excited to be invited on behalf of Neuromersive. This has been an amazing journey so far in terms of where we've come from and where we've gotten to. I suppose let's start at the beginning. What was the problem we were trying to solve? And the problem fundamentally is, and for those people who are not aware, is that there's fundamentally two groups of people in society. There's the able-bodied and the non-able-bodied. Now, many people are referred to these people as disabled. I don't actually like that term. I prefer to use the term variabilities rather than disabilities, because generally everyone has a skill set, and where they might have in one area, they have amazing powers in another area. Now, recognizing that, it's important to take into account that the things that most of us take for granted are really simple things, and we basically don't know how valuable they are until they're taken away. For example, things like these and being able to use these are just staggeringly important to the way we express ourselves in this world. Now, I was very privileged, to be working with people who had, for various reasons, been affected in ways that they couldn't presently use their arms and their hands. And again, it's quite a shocking thing and a traumatic thing when you first have an injury and you realize that you can't interact with the planet in the way you used to. After seeing this for a long time, working with people and fundamentally, I sense sharing their sense of frustration, I sort of felt, well, surely there has to be a better way. And I'd been working in the area of neurorehabilitation for about, nearly 13 years now. And what I was seeing, in terms of the results that a lot of people weren't getting, I think was disturbing to me. And it was the point where I thought, wow, I'm surprised that there isn't a better solution to this particular issue of upper limb rehabilitation, as in hand and arm. So I hit the research. I basically took it upon myself to become a private researcher and hit the world's databases of what techniques were potentially viable and what was the neuroscience and the physiology behind it. And I started to come up with some hypotheses based upon where I thought the gaps were in the system. Now, at that time, that was before VR. Now, for those of you into VR, it's important to realize that VR had already been tried to be commercialized twice since the 1980s, and it failed. The third time around, luckily, it worked. It's brilliant, and it's going to be a game. Well, it already is a world changer, and it's going to progressively become more so. What I became to realize in one of the principal problems in rehabilitation is engagement. Now, I'm sure many of you that are listening would have at some point had an injury where you may have been asked to go to a physiotherapist and they would have given you a set of exercises to do. And some of those exercises may have been far more, let's say, enjoyable than others. And yet you were given a task to go down and do these exercises multiple times. And, it's probably fair to say that 50% of you, or the people who, have been asked to do these things, would have not exactly been excited about continuously doing them. This is determined, referred to as engagement. And the truth of it is that 50% of all of the outcome potentiality in rehab is due to engagement. Because even if you have the most brilliant practitioner, you have the most brilliant home-based treatment program, if you don't do it, you're not going to get the result, because fundamentally what you're trying to do is use your body parts to affect the way your brain controls your body part. And there are two ways to do that: repetitiously or with an enhanced environment. So the enhanced environment part is where it relates to engagement. So to put some perspective, for those of you who may not be aware, in Australia alone, just for stroke, you're talking about 50,000 people a year, and it's getting more, just for stroke. And then there's a whole broad range of neurodegenerative diseases, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries that affect this upper limb. They're all basically stuck in the same situation. So what the idea was fundamentally is I had an idea about the hypothesis of how I could combine certain methods of stimulating the brain via the hand. And then the problem was the engagement part. And that's where I began to thought, potentially VR may be the thing that fills this role. The reason is that VR, look, VR is essentially an optical illusion. And in some ways, you could think about it like a form of hypnosis. Now, I'm not making a causative relationship between those two things, but if your brain is fully engaged in what it's doing, it's activating more signaling pathways, and it's going to create changes in most cases at a much faster rate. That's really important. That's really, really important, because fundamentally, the more emotionally and cognitively you're engaged in what you're doing, you're going to get a faster and a better result for more people. And I began to develop hypotheses about how VR may be able to do this, but I didn't know. I didn't know until about 4 years ago, when the first commercially stable VR system came out. And luckily, I was one of the first people in the country to get it, and I began testing it in my rehabilitation clinic. And straight away, it was completely obvious that it was a game changer. I could not have been happier that A, the tech was stable, and B, the effect it was having on people. And then I thought, okay, now I have the framework of basically a top-down and bottom-up approach, whereas I'm using different methods to stimulate the hand and the arm. So that's basically called downstream stimulation of the brain. And now I had the upstream. So then we had both signaling going up and down, which is more reflective of how the actual nervous system generates signaling. So the issue was then, okay, well, that's great, but these are disassociated parts of technology, and they're not speaking to each other, and they're quite clunky in a way. So I began to think, okay, so we need a way to simplify this and to make it usable. And this led to, probably about 2 years of experimentation. So there were 2 years of theoretical research and 2 years of experimentation in my clinic. And I basically was just very excited. I was very excited about the potential of a system that can incorporate a much more systemic way to get brain and body communicating and get the person's emotions engaged in what they were doing. And so we started making rough prototypes. And the truth is they're almost a little bit embarrassing now compared to what they were used to. But I suppose the next part of the story was I needed VR content. So obviously we needed to make the rehabilitation relative to what people were needing. And when you lose your hand function, the thing that's most important to you are what's called your daily living tasks: being able to get dressed, being able to open the door, hold a cup, cutlery, eat, brush your teeth, brush your hair. Those unexciting things that we take for granted suddenly became the biggest game in town. The issue was I didn't know how to do that, and then I serendipitously met my team, and then the story changed forever based on that, and it's been an incredible ride so far. So I hope that's a really good little basic introduction into the background of Neuromassive.
That was amazing, Rowan. You're so passionate. It comes out so organically from you, and it's infectious. And yeah, it sounds like you guys have had a hell of a ride, and I'm so looking forward to asking you this very long list of questions in front of me. I will say that we do have limited time today, so while we may not be able to get through everything, and I already see the Q&A kind of blowing up a little bit, so I'll do my best to get through as many as possible. Firstly, I just thought, listening to your talk just there, Rowan, it would be great to just get a very quick summary of what the tech actually looks like and looks and feels like if we were looking at it.
Okay, can I give you a pop culture analogy? That might help a lot of people. To anyone out there who's seen the movie Ready Player One, which was the first big screen epic about VR,
I did.
When you see the scene where he puts the suit on and then all of a sudden he's gone into bed and he can feel things, that's what we're doing. So it's the feeling, three-dimensional interaction that was the key thing that we're aiming for. So that's basically looking at hardware, a soft wearable on the hand, and VR headsets that are now completely standalone. That's fundamentally the components, hardware-wise. And then you have the software.
And what does the software component, what is that? Does it
So the
do
software
inside?
composes of, for example, real living environments, like internals of real homes, with all of the issues, with all of the situations like bathrooms, kitchens, gardens, offices that you would rely on these to interact with, and getting those in a way that the storylines are believable, the interactions are believable, and they're gamified. So you're not just doing things, you're doing things, and you get rewarded in amazing ways that make you feel incredible. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm just going to pop over to the Q&A for a second because one of the questions is, do you play anything in VR for fun? What gave you the idea to make rehabilitation program using VR? You kind of covered that in your talk just there, but yeah, do you play VR?
The funny thing about that is that people ask me that all the time in my clinic. They go, well, you must spend loads of time after work on playing. No, I don't. I actually don't get a lot of time. What I do, this is what happens. New clients come in and they say, okay, I can't use my arm. And we say, what is your most favorite thing to do that makes you feel happy? And they might say, fishing. I'm like, okay, I go and search and I find the best VR fishing. I test it out, make sure that it's appropriate, and I go, there you go. Now your part of your therapy is you're going to go fishing in VR. That's the reality. That's what I do. Most of the time when I'm not doing that, I don't want to be in front of a screen, to tell you the truth.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So tell me about your co-founding team, Anshul, who's the CEO, and Oliver, who's COO. What kind of skills are they? Do they bring this VR skills into the company and
Yeah.
the expertise there?
Sure. So basically, going to the management structure, earlier this year, we made a decision to go to a more horizontal management structure. So we're all basically co-CEO now, trying to reflect more, I suppose, horizontal structures. In terms of skill sets, yeah, I could not have gotten lucky to meet Oliver, who was working with Anshul in the first place. It was just a life-changing thing, completely serendipitous. I was looking for VR content producers and a visual tech interface. I didn't have those skills. I'm a designer and a neurorehabilitation. And we sort of realized they were looking for an opportunity and I was looking for a skill set. We came together. So basically, Anshul, for example, visual effects. I mean, he was working with a team that won an Academy Award for Happy Feet. It gives you some type of the idea of the level of skill and experience that are on. Oliver is just, I could refer to him as the Godfather because he makes things happen. He just orchestrates things in such an amazing way. I'm so glad I don't have to do what he does because I couldn't do it, first and foremost. So we have this project management, we have this technical interface, and we have me as the designer and the clinical interface. And I think that there's this really, really efficient balance of opinions going on there. So that's fundamentally how the team works.
Fantastic. It sounds like a really well-rounded team. I've met all of you. It's a wonderful team. How large is your team now? I know you've had a few hires in. How big is it now?
So we're about 6 or 7, but depending on where we are, if we need more developers, we bring more developers on time. We also have probably one of the best industrial design companies and definitely the best electronics design company in Australia, in our opinion. I see them personally as part of our team. They're integral, and they have multi-disc teams within their businesses. So when I think about Neuromersive, I don't just think it's 3 of us. I think there's this network because truly it takes a network to surmount this type of technical challenge that's not been done before.
Definitely. So you guys have had a massive year. You've taken part in the Actuator Accelerator program.
Yeah.
But you're based at Cicada. You're awarded close to $1 million from the BioMedTech Horizons program operated by MTP Connect. 2020 is almost done, and it's been amazing for you guys. What's 2021 looking like for Neuromersive?
I think stunningly exciting because, up to this point, we just had these fundamental technological problems to solve. Some of them were ones we just were not going to be able to do ourselves. And yet the market changed, new tech came available, and we thought, oh, wow, okay, now that one's done. And now we can focus on all these other things. I think primary focus is getting us ready for medical trials and trying to get down that medical compliance pathway. Now, the technology on its own is a hugely complex thing, but medical device regulation is mind-numbingly complex. And again, we rely on multiple advisors externally to help us to make decisions to navigate this very, very complex pathway. trials, our first trials. We have our first basic prototypes that will be delivered in early 2021, where we can actually start putting them on people in my clinic and actually saying them work for the first time and seeing what works, what doesn't work. That's amazingly exciting. It's only been a 2-year journey roughly, and to go from my rough prototypes and no software to this is incredible.
That's awesome, and that kind of brings me very naturally to my next question, which you guys have been through MedLab program with Cicada, and now you're going through the actuator program as well.
Yep.
How important has it been for Neuromersiv to align with partners like Cicada, like the actuator, and like the industrial design firm that you mentioned, to help guide you through the process of being a deep tech startup and a med tech startup? Because that just comes with a whole other layer of complexity.
100%. It's a really relevant question, Tari, and the fact is that you know when you're trying to do this, there's a couple of ways to go about it. You can either say, well, we're going to take on all these challenges ourselves, and we're going to basically pull people internally to do it, or we're going to find the best people do it and trust that they'll partner with us and do the best job. As being a designer for a long time, I learned that it's important to focus on what you feel comfortable with. And as an adjunct to that, let's say if you want to be a tech entrepreneur, an entrepreneur in the first place, forget being comfortable, right? It's not going to happen. It's a lightning. The environment changes so quickly. But the incubators have been stunningly important to us because there's just this deep body of knowledge out there who's done a lot of what you're doing before, face the same challenges, and just understanding the effects it has on you, not only as a team, but as people. Knowing what you're aware from and firsthand experience is very different than just constantly hitting your head against brick wall. It's been a stunningly important thing, and I think that the level of the education and the connections and the support from the incubators has just gotten better and better. It's brilliant.
That's great to know. So you mentioned you've got a big 2021 ahead of you.
Yeah.
How do you think will you be hiring to resource into that and hit all your milestones? How do you see your team growing over the next 12 months?
Yeah, really relevant. We have to be, as the pace of change. Well, I suppose when you hit different milestones, what seems to happen is then things accelerate faster and then your timelines get shorter. So you need to bring in other people. So absolutely we'll be expanding, and probably at this point will be more along the lines of consultants to navigate the medical compliance pathway, but also in developers, software developers of different types, skill sets. Yes.
And where do you source this talent from? Do you look at sites like LinkedIn or AngelList, or do you use recruiters, or is it referral system? What's
combinations? Mainly recruiters and internal external networks. Yeah.
Okay.
Combination, because otherwise, again, you think it as a small tech company, having to say to someone, hey, you've got to stop what you're doing and then go out and try and recruit people from maybe all over Australia. You just can't do that. You just have to stay so focused on the roles that you're doing. Yeah. So externalizing is the way to go.
Okay. And who controls kind of the hiring at Neuromersiv? Is it the three of you, or is it somebody else? Or
no, it's the three of us, because again, it would be something like this. It's really related to our primary skill sets. Say if it was related to visual effects, then Anshul would know what to ask for much better than I would. If it was more along the lines of design or deeper understanding of neurophysiology, then I would be doing it. If it was project management, it'd be Oliver. But it's all generally, we all have to come to an agreement, because fundamentally it's not just about skill set, it's about the human being, because you have to work with in your small team and you're heavily reliant on it. So it has to be fundamentally a joint decision.
Exactly. And that couldn't more beautifully lead me to my next question, which is, apart from technical brilliance is kind of like the expected. It's what you need when you're working in a company like Neuromersiv. What do you look for beyond technical? What do you look for in the human being when you're hiring? What do you want to see?
I personally want to see a person who wants to make a contribution to make the world a better place. And I'm sorry if that sounds tacky, but when we're not making widgets here, we're trying to change a lot of people's lives, and we know we can do it. So someone who basically can see that and has an emotive connection to the end goal, I think is profoundly important. I want them to feel like I'm not just working on another programming job. I'm actually here and going to change things for the better.
Okay, and that's amazing, and that's kind of like our mantra at Cicada as well, because
Yeah.
it's a lofty goal, and it's very I guess it's very rewarding to be working for a company that's doing so much good in the world. What's how do you take people along with you on the journey? How do you kind of inject that feeling into your company culture?
I think it's really got a lot to do with, people. If you're going to hire someone, most people these days will scope you out online. And if they're doing that, they would probably, with us, for example, look at the website, which is not ultimately fancy because, again, it wasn't our priority at this point. But they would probably see the things we've done in the media, where you're seeing real personal interactions, like some of the early trials we did in hospitals. And I think I think a person either gets a sense that here's something different, or basically, they feel like well, look, I think in technical terms, for technical people, there's two groups of people. People who like to be locked in a cupboard and just work on stuff, and that's great. But there's people who actually want to firsthand be involved in seeing what they're doing is actually affecting real people in a positive way. So it's the second group of people that I'm looking for.
And how is COVID? I know you're based in Newcastle, is that
Newcastle.
right?
Hmm.
How's navigating the team throughout this year and COVID, and how has that been for you guys?
I think that, look, definitely it's made it more challenging. There's nothing the same as having a face-to-face personal interaction. There isn't, because there's always something you miss out. But there's an energy to when a team's together, particularly when you hit a milestone. And I think that's really important. I think all in all, we've done very well. I think we've survived very well. We've obviously continued to accelerate greatly, in spite of COVID. So not that much.
That's wonderful. It's really good to hear. It's not the easiest thing to do, and hasn't been the easiest year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very unprecedented.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of bring it back to you and talk about what do you feel that as a leader and as part of the leadership team of Neuromersive, what do you bring beyond your expertise? Yeah, to the table. Some of those really crucial soft skills.
I think that for me, it's being able to sense where people are at, trying to read beyond what they're saying and trying to understand the intent. Because when you have people in a team, okay, people may be using common language, but that is not necessarily reflective of their intent or what they're really thinking. And I think being able to understand a person, and just where face-to-face interactions are really important, and try and define the difference between what they're saying and what they're meaning, is really important, because I work with people with variabilities for a long time, and some people are speech impaired, some people are cognitively impaired, and it teaches you to take the time to just actively listen, observe, try and feel where they're coming from. And I think probably that is maybe something that I'm okay at. Trying to draw long bows of disassociated information chains and say, hey, look, we might be here, but if we did this, this, and this, then we could reach this whole new level of interaction. And that's probably, and determination. I think I'm just like a rabid dog. I won't give up.
Well, that's something you definitely need a healthy dose of when you're in a startup.
Totally.
And I'm just jumping over into one of the Q&A questions, just reading it out. You seem really passionate about what you do. Did you always know that this was what you wanted to do?
That's a great question. So I've been designing things since I was 6 years old, and I honestly, I didn't know I'd end up as a co-founder of a tech company. That really happened as a result of being exposed to real human beings who were traumatized and felt like, how am I supposed to enjoy the rest of my life when I can't interact with people and with the environment? And there was one, I'll give you a great example. There was one thing that tipped me over the edge after years of this. It was a young mum, and she came in, and we've been trying to improve her hand function for ages. She tried everything, and that's what I always say, I've tried everything. She cried, and I just saw this deep sense of profound sadness. And she said, all I want to do is pick my children up and play with them like I used to. And my little mind goes into revenge mode. It goes, that's it. And from that moment on, I was like, I am going to find a way to solve this no matter how long it takes. And, it wasn't altruistic that I set out. It was revenge based, to tell you the truth. I wanted to, that's it. I'm just tired of these stories. I got to do something. And that's what it's like for me, when you design things, what you do though in the process, particularly when you're young, you think, oh, I'm going to design something that's going to be shiny, perfect thing, and it's only going to take 5 minutes, going to cost $20. And what you realize, getting pounded and reality hitting you over time is relax. Don't expect shiny showroom versions of things. Just focus on one set of problem solving at a time and bringing the team tighter and tighter together and just figuring out a better way to work with people, because that will lead to better problem solving. So here I am, like 35 years later, of designing things. And the fact is they don't all work. You just simply have to accept you're going to fail probably more than you're going to succeed. But if you do not give up and you're passionate and you have a good team, you absolutely will get a win. That's my reality.
That is really valuable advice. And it's really good for people to know, aspiring founders out there, that it's definitely not an easy road. And there's a lot of failing fast, and there's a lot of failing, but there's a lot of rewards as well. Can you share with us some of, like, you shared that really incredibly sad story about that patient you worked with. What are some of the success stories that you can share that you've seen come about due to your technology? I know it's not in the market as such yet, but
well, I think just even from, if you look back on the process of developing the rough prototypes in the clinic and then coming to the point where you realize, hang on, we've really got something here. And then seeing the person, for example, go from a very limited hand function going, oh my God, my fingers move, my hand's not clenched so tight anymore, my arm feels relaxed. That's me moving my fingers in VR, and then coming out and going, oh my God, that my hand just moved for the first time. That's staggering. That's staggering form of reward. So I think, again, if you think about it, being an entrepreneur and being in a startup, I think, it can appear to be maybe exotic, and it's not to say there aren't those moments, right? There really are, and they're amazing. But fundamentally what you're doing is basically just going, I'm going to accept the fact that most of my efforts are going to seem like they're in vain, but I'm going to get these wins because the commitment is there, the team's there. And when it does happen, it's amazing. It is life-changing. It just reaffirms everything you've been through. And then you go, right, now we're going to go to the next mountain, which is going to be the thing in front, but we're going to get there. That's what it's like in reality. And I've had many of those moments, albeit small, but it just allows you to go, okay, recharged. I'm good, next mountain. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to talk about capital, because capital is the lifeblood of startups, and I know and grants especially are an important part of that. And I know they've been an important part of your journey as well. How do you know when's the right time to apply for a grant and which grants to apply for?
Yeah, it's a really relevant question, because the fact is that we're very lucky in Australia. There's a lot of grants. I mean, there is an amazing amount of grants out there. But choosing which one and knowing how to get through the process, getting the right advice, because it's not just the content, but it's the process. And it is very much like a talent quest at times, because, for example, if you ask Oliver what he thinks about grant writing, he'll say it's part science and part black art. And he's right about that. The thing about it, though, is that start small, okay? Don't go for $1 million grants, because when you realize the amount of work involved in $1 million grant from being fresh, don't do it. It sounds great, but just don't. Start with small grants. Get used to the process. Get used to the stress you're going to go from, what it's going to demand from you, and accept the fact you're going to get knocked back far, far more many times than what you're going to win a grant. But take it on board as a learning experience. Learn how to go through the process and learn how to manage how the process makes you feel and the demands on it, and then go for the next grant. So sequentially, start really slow and simple.
I really like that. I really like that you also mentioned to manage how it makes you feel, because that's the psychological aspect is
Totally. It can be massively stressful, and it can be really disappointing, and it can take the wind out of your sails if you sort of think, well, this application's amazing, it's going to smoke everyone else. And then it doesn't, it's
yeah.
just, yeah.
And how do you resource that skill within your company? Is it something you do in-house to apply for grants? Because that's a enormous skill in itself.
And again, I would say here's where we're very lucky with Oliver and Anshul. So basically, Oliver is the majority of orchestration about knowing how to weave the pathway of getting through a grant application. Then Anshul and I are adding our own input into it as needed. So it's basically Oliver's the project manager, and then you say for Anshul and I, then Anshul, I want you to do this part. Ro, I want you to do this part. So a multi-disc approach is the way to go. And if we need external advice, we seek external advice. But predominantly, most of it's been done in-house. Yeah.
Cool. And just going back to the Q&A, what's the most interesting VR program you've gotten to try? You mentioned fishing, but have you tried anything else that's really good that you'd recommend?
Yeah, great question. As you would be, the amount of VR software out there is expanding on a daily basis. I know I get dozens of VR newsletters from all around every day. Expand. The graphics are getting better and better and better. The interactions are getting better. Now we have physics-based interactions, which is just taking it to the next level. We have haptics, multi-sensory interface. But for me personally, in relating to what I do, one of the breakthrough ones I did was called Aperture Hand Lab. Now, Aperture Hand Lab works with what's called a Valve Index VR system, where you have different hand controls, which can sense where every one of your fingers are and how hard you're even gripping the controller. It's based on it uses physics-based software, the way you interact with it, and there's a persona you're interacting with, and it's somewhat funny. And I think that's by far, in terms of hand interaction, Aperture Hand Lab is the funniest and best thing I've done.
Fabulous. And speaking of that, that kind of triggered a little memory. In your tech as well, and the handset that you guys have come up with, isn't there some stimulation, or can you tell us a bit about how that works?
Totally. Okay, so Neuroscience 101, here we go. In order for you to use your hands, okay, you need to be able to feel. Imagine you've been in a cold environment, really cold, you're trying to do a buttoned shirt. If your hands are numb, you can't do it up. Okay, so that's called sensory. This is called motor. It's a feedback loop, sensory, motor, sensory. Getting sensory, far more sensory information is going to the brain than motor's coming down. This tells the brain what to do. So we realized that in order to be really immersive in VR, you had to feel what was in VR. So what I've done is taking basic haptics and taking it completely to the next level. So you're looking at type of interactions that you saw in Ready Player One. And we're combining that with specialized type of electrical stimulation, which amplifies the sensory input going in. So then we have another type of electrical stimulation. For example, if your hand's like this and you need to pick up a cup in VR, VR knows where everything is, it's gridded. And if here's the cup, here's your hand, you can't open it. It then sends a signal, opens your hand. And then when you go to grip it, then you feel the cup. So then you fulfill the sensory motor feedback loop that your brain relies on daily interaction. It's amazing feeling.
That's cool. And was that always part of your tech?
I designed it from the beginning. Okay, so I always designed that but actually implementing that into a higher fidelity system, well, that's quite a complicated thing to do. And this is where we heavily rely on our external partners to actually help us to figure out, first of all, is this even technically feasible? And if it is, how do we structure the mountains we're going to have to climb in a way that we don't crash? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It's fascinating. We've seen another Q&A. Was your business positively or negatively affected by the pandemic? Did it affect Neuromersiv at all?
No, it didn't. It affected us in the way that we couldn't personally, the three of us as a team, couldn't interact in a way. And I think that definitely that had some type of, I suppose, anti-cohesion effect. But, once it was over, boom, we were back together and we slunk. It was like a slingshot when we were back physically together again. It's surmountable. All problems are virtually surmountable, provided you have the right mindset.
Exactly. All right. So why should someone want to work for Neuromassive?
That's a really good question. And the answer is really easy. Because you want to make a difference. Because you want to make a difference. you're smart enough to know that we're living in a world where our ability to use technology to help human beings is vastly advanced from where it was even 2 years ago, and that rate of change will keep changing. Fundamentally, you have to believe in your own ability to initiate that change based on everything you've ever learned, and as much empathy as you can summon as a human being to focus your mind to get through the immense challenges that it's going to take. Because neuromersive is really survives by cohesion and being able to know how to navigate consistent problems.
Amazing. And I've seen another question come in. I'll rephrase it a little bit. So, what's the best way for someone wanting a career at Neuromersive? What's the best way for them to approach you?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing we want to see is what have you done? What are you good at? What are you good at? For me personally, right? I'm not so much interested in your academic qualifications. That I'm interested in what you can do, what you've demonstrated you can do, and how passionately committed you are. I'm a bit old school in the fact that when I was first working, what you did was you wanted a job and the job didn't exist, you knock on the door 100 times if you had to and say, I'll work for free for a little while and demonstrate. And then basically, you'd be in the door and then you just put your head down and work and work and work until you were acknowledged. Now, I'm not saying that might be possible for a lot of people, but your ability to demonstrate passion and commitment and work independently and think globally rather than just thinking, I have a skill set and that's all I'm going to do. That doesn't work in small. That works if you're working for Apple or Microsoft, that works really well. It doesn't work if you're in a small startup.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Um, what else? So, if Neuromersive kicked, in an ideal world, did everything that you ever wanted it to do, what's the end game? What's your big vision and your audacious goal for Neuromersive?
It's quite clear, and it actually is our goal. Our goal is that we want to actually help restore functional mobility in people's upper limbs globally within the next 5 years. We want to see this brand be globally recognized as the thing that changed upper limb rehabilitation and brought back people's ability to interact with the world when they were told it's probably never going to happen.
That is amazing. What a vision.
Yeah.
I've seen another Q&A pop up. You mentioned practical abilities. In terms of PhDs in the industry, how do you feel academia and the industry are moving in the future?
It's a really good question. And because I work with graduates, both clinically and technically, what I fundamentally see here is, again, academia gives you a framework, okay? Let me put it another way. Academia is the plan, okay, but it's not the terrain. That's very, very important. Working in industry is the terrain, okay, because it's lumpy. Whereas academia is this two-dimensional thing, right? And it gives you, okay, basic, a rough two-dimensional, but that's not what it's like in reality because there's no interacting with people who you might like. There's no thinking, I'm so tired here, I don't know how to do this, I can't focus. Can I actually even say that I can't focus? That's being able to navigate the terrain. And so I think, right now what happens is you go from two-dimensional to three-dimensional in one swoop. That's really hard for a lot of people. You may have spent 4, 5, 6 years in academia, getting your qualifications, but that doesn't necessarily give you the emotional intelligence required to work in a small cohesive team, working in a very dynamic environment that are facing constant problems and need to pivot very quickly. So I'd say that I'd like to think that they're getting more, they're recognizing the academia is trying to recognize the value of IQ more. And I see this with university graduates clinically who come in too. And the fact is that you can't teach EQ. You can teach EQ. You can't, you can't teach a person how to be emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
You can teach technical stuff. That's not a problem. So for me, again, EQ, emotional intelligence comes before IQ. And I think I still think there's a big gap there because I see a lot of people almost shocked. Whoa, wasn't expecting this, Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's another question that's come through. How did you find your co-founders? That's a really good question, actually.
Okay, so
I know this story, but
yeah. Okay, well, just keep it simple. There's this saying called serendipity, right? And it's terribly overused, particularly in advertising. But put it this way: I've come up with this design, okay, and I've got a rough framework and really rough prototypes, okay. But I have no idea about VR programming and visuals, and certainly couldn't do what I'm doing and do project management on a very, very complex level. And I'm thinking, Yellow Pages is not helping me on this one, and neither's Google. So again, global thinking. And I just thought, okay, right, what am I going to do? I thought the first thing is don't panic, keep doing what you're doing, keep putting your attention in the right place, but put yourself out in you have to put yourself out there in a certain, it's almost like dating, right? You're not going to get a date if you stay at home and eat pizza every night. You have to put yourself out there. I was honestly, I was at a personal development event in Sydney because I'm trying to think, well, how, if I'm going to navigate this complex emotional environment, then maybe I need to work on myself to be able to survive it. And I was in this crowded room, and across the other side of the room, I didn't even see him. I don't even know how I heard this dude talking about VR, and my ears are tuned to it. Bing! And I walked over there and I said, look, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but were you talking about VR? And it was Oliver, and he said, yeah, I own a VR animation studio in Newtown. And I was like, is this it? Inside. And it didn't take long. And he went back to Angela and said, I met this dude, and they basically were looking for an opportunity to transition out of what they were doing. And I was looking for the team and the skill set that they represented. It was, I don't know, people have different belief sets, but it just was an amazing, life-changing for us, and a rocket ship ride since that. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we've got another question. On your website, people can sign up for a trial. What do trials involve?
Yeah, okay. So the trial pathway is an interesting one, and it involves different stages. So the first trials will be actually held in my clinic here in Newcastle, and really that's just on what we referred as beta prototypes. They don't look fancy and they don't have all the functionality that the end commercialized product would do, but they're looking to see, do they actually have a clinical effect on the person? And so they start off really small, limited amounts of people. And then we go to partner organizations, and then we go into hospitals, and then we go into larger hospitals and more groups. So that's how trials work. We're just coordinating those very first initial trials at the beginning. I think to be clear, the very first trials are not going to be a thing that's going to give you back your hand function. They're going to be things that tells us, is the design fundamentally good, or does it break within 5 minutes? Or does it just not work? So I'd say stay in touch with us, absolutely, because you'll hear about it when we move to the trials that are more public. But that's really the state of the nation at this point. All of our resources on getting those prototypes ready to do that very first testing.
Great. And what's the way people can kind of keep abreast of what's happening and what the developments are at Neuromersiv? Do you have a newsletter or anything people can sign up to?
That's a really relevant question. I think they're the type of things that we'll be looking to build as an integral part of our, I suppose, public interactions. At the moment, just email us, and if you really want to be determined, and we'll get the idea. We'll definitely get the idea.
Fantastic. Well, we actually have a form that that the team will share in the chat, which actually allows people to get in touch with you, Rohan. So
yeah, thank you. Great. We're more than happy to talk to anyone. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think we're pretty much out of time. So I'm just going to wrap up with one final question. Sure. So for someone wanting to be a part of the Neuromersiv journey and the Neuromersiv team, what should they know? What advice would you give them?
Be persistent, be transparent, and basically come from a point of view where it's about contribution to the larger goal rather than you feeling like I want to work for a cool tech company. That's what will resonate with me. Don't be prepared to do whatever it takes, in the beginning, and that leads to good things down the track. Patience and persistence, contribution.
Amazing. That's great advice. everyone take note. Rohan, thank you so much for your time, for telling us about Neuromersive's journey and growth, and for your generous advice for those considering a career with Neuromersive or deep tech. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tari, and thank you for all the support. It's been amazing. It's an honor to be asked today. Thank you.
Fantastic. And just to everyone else listening, thank you so much for joining us. This is just week 2 of Emerge. This goes on for another 3 weeks. We've got 8 more amazing Ask Me Anything sessions like this one coming up over the next few weeks. So make sure you register. It's super easy to do this. The team will share the link, and it's just one link, and you can sign up for however many you want. Yeah, and yeah, get in touch. Like I mentioned, if you want to ask Rohan a question or get in touch with him or congratulate him on a fantastic session, there's the link we'll share with you as well. And on our website, we've got all the jobs that these companies have as well, because they're all in need of talent and they're all hiring. So just to end up with, I'd like to shout out to our sponsors, our main sponsor, City of Sydney, without whom Emerge wouldn't be possible, and event partner as well, South Everleigh. Thank you so much to everyone who logged in today and to everyone who will be watching this video online. Thanks and bye.